Heavenly Father, we thank you for what you've given us, Lord, the abundance. And Father, we give back to you a small portion with gladness, with joy. We turn over what you've given to us. And Lord, it's all yours to begin with. And in the end, it will all be yours anyways. And so, Father, we just pray that you'd bless these tithes and offerings. And Lord, we pray that that it would further your kingdom, that your glory would be spread in our community and around the world. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. I like services like this. They're fun. I remember as a kid, we had 2 Sunday services. Who remembers 2 Sunday services? It was like Sunday morning and Sunday evening, right? Now when churches say we're going to 2 services, it's usually because they've got lack of space to handle the people that they've got, and so they do 2 services, usually an earlier one or a later one. But we used to do 2 services, and then you'd do some sort of midweek Bible study. Remember the midweek? It was like Wednesdays usually at our church. Anyone remember the midweek Bible study that was like, it wasn't called anything, it wasn't a special class or a course, it was just every week there's a midweek Bible study. I remember being told that those who love the church come on Sunday morning, those who love their pastor come on Sunday evening, and those who love the Lord come on Wednesday. I don't know how true that was, but I sure saw the crowds change and shift over those different church functions. And I think one of the neat parts about Sunday service that we need to guard and protect is for the Spirit of God to move, for Him to come and have His way in a service. Even this morning, I felt like we could have just kept worshiping, and it's one of those things. I don't know if you felt like maybe we should have or maybe we shouldn't have, and that's kind of the tension that Kay was feeling, and I was feeling as well. Just going, okay, where do we go from here, Lord? What should we do? And sometimes we may do it right. Sometimes we may do it wrong. There may be times where we should sit a little longer. Maybe we should worship more. But I love the opportunity, the invitation to come into this where this place where God begins to kind of take over things and begin to do something special. So it's awesome. This morning I want to talk about who has your yes. Who has your yes? Okay, we're going to start in Numbers 25. We're going to talk about Phinehas. Phinehas. Anyone know the story of Phinehas? Interesting. Well, we're going to learn about Phinehas this morning. You've read about Phinehas. Yes, you have. A couple times? No, you have. I guarantee you read about him a couple times. Because we're going to read some scripture this morning that covers Phinehas' life, a little bit of Phinehas' life. Numbers 25, verse 1. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with the Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices of their gods. The people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before their gods. So Israel yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. So the Israelites, they've come out of Egypt. They're in the desert. They come into the promised land, and now they're beginning to intermingle. And God said very explicitly when they came out of the desert into the promised land, be careful not to yoke yourself. Be careful not to join yourself with the people of the land, because they have all kinds of very evil and very demonic practices. And you need to guard yourself against it. Well, here in Numbers we read that the Israelites began to associate with these people, and they began to intermingle. They began to participate in their idolatrous worship, in their sexual immorality, which was usually tied with their worship. So doing sinful acts as a part of their worship to essentially the devil is the way that worked. And these involved all kinds of horrible things. So the Lord said to Moses, oh, I see I'm in the wrong one. I should be in Judges. That's the wrong precursor. But the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of these people, Kill them and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel. That's intense, yeah? That's really intense. So Moses said to Israel's judges, each of you must put to death those of your people who have yoked themselves to Baal of Peor. Then an Israelite man brought into the camp a Midianite woman right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel, while they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw this, he left the assembly and took a spear in his hand, and he followed the Israelite into the tent. So you got to understand, we're not going to get into the weeds too much on this. They're basically going into a sacred place, the tent of meeting, where Moses had set up this place where he would meet with God. And these people, these idol worshipers, these Satan worshipers are coming into that place. And Phinehas, something rises up in Phinehas, and he goes, no, not on my watch. Right? So we read what he does. Where were we? Verse 12? No. Verse 8. And followed the Israelites into the tent. He drove a spear into both of them, right through the Israelite man and into the woman's stomach. And that's interesting because a lot of their idolatrous worship was based on fertility. They believed as they worshipped, and how they worshipped was these sexual immoral acts in front of these gods, that would give them favor. That would give them fertility both for their own wombs, for their own families and reproduction, but as well for the land. It's no accident that Phinehas drove this spear through the stomach, through the womb. And he goes, no, we're going to cut this off. Right through the Israelite man and into the woman's stomach. Then the plague against the Israelites was stopped. God's anger was, his anger was being poured out on the Israelites because they were worshiping other gods. They were sinning. They were doing blasphemous, horrible, heinous things. And God was like, I can't have this. This is not okay. And Phinehas rises up, this man of righteousness, this man of indignation, where he says, no, this is not okay, and something must be done. He obeys, understand, he obeys the voice of the Lord. Down in verse 12. Therefore, tell Phinehas, I am making my covenant of peace with him. He and his descendants will have a covenant of a lasting priesthood, because he was zealous for the honor of his God and made atonement for the Israelites. Wow. Phinehas, he rises up and says, no, this is not going to pass. These people will not desecrate the place of meeting the Lord. And he drives a spear through two people to draw an end to what is happening in the land. He is fierce. Guys, we sang this morning about rising up. We sang this morning about chains falling away. And I want to tell you this. The best thing that you can do to partner with God's hand in your life, the best thing you can do to have God's blessing on your life, is to obey what he's commanded you. You want to have God's favor on your life? You want to have a history, a heritage, that's the word I'm looking for, a heritage of blessing from your Heavenly Father? Grab a spear and thrust it through sin. Grab a spear and destroy its productiveness in your life. The areas of compromise that you know is there. Everyone in Israel understood this. This was not an argument. This was not a discussion. This was plain. It was obvious. Some of the heinous acts of these people is they would actually take the offspring that they had begged for productivity from this evil demonic god, and they would take them, they would heat up the statues of the god, make them burning hot, and they would stick live babies on the hands of this burning altar, and they would go into shock and die in front of them. Hundreds and hundreds of babies were sacrificed this way. When you hear stories in the Old Testament, I'm going to pause and go down a rabbit trail, that are hard to understand. Why would God want to wipe out everybody? Why would he want to do that? Because he is so fiercely passionate about love that when evil, demonic things come in, when anything that opposes love, he actually has a season of grace. I want to declare over your life, the sin and compromise that's in your life, God is not okay with it. Because he has not brought judgment on your life, does not mean that he's okay with your sin and compromise. Our world, this is a message for our world broadly. But guys, we're in the world. We're the Israelites. The call this morning is this: who is leading the way of compromising their life to our world? Bring them before the people. This must end. This has to end. It must end. Who will be a Phinehas and rise up with righteous anger, with righteous vengeance, and say no more. No more sin, no more compromise. This will not happen. Not on my watch. When we look at the Old Testament and some of these difficult passages where God is asking people, oh man, we could get into the weeds really hard here this morning. I'm just going to say a few things. Firstly, God cannot commit murder. Go home, research it. I'm not going to go any farther than that. The Creator, when he ends the life of his created, it's not murder. When created beings end the lives of each other, that's called murder. Because when you die, that is not the end. I'm just going to leave that there. That's maybe too much. I don't know. Maybe I went in there too shallow. But the other thing is we do not completely understand the whole of the history of some of these nations and peoples. When God asked the Israelites to go in and wipe people out, there's a few things at play, and I'm going to go over a couple of them just really quickly. Okay? So let's I'm going to use the analogy of the Edmonton Oilers over the last month and a half, right? The last part of the season, annihilated everyone they played. Right? There's only 2 games they lost, and 1 they lost in overtime. So many games. They won like 6-1, 5-1. They were dominating. They absolutely smashed every team. They annihilated them. When I use that word annihilate, do I mean that they killed them all? Or did they thoroughly and handily beat them? Terminology in the Old Testament. Are you with me? God says, go and annihilate these people. The next verse, and I won't give you the verses right now, but usually later on in the passage you'll find this phrase, but don't intermingle with them and don't intermarry with them. Wait a second. You just told us to wipe them all out. Okay? Do you understand in the Old Testament, there's this language that says, God says, go and wipe them all out. We need to understand that it's hyperbolic language. It's Hebrew language that basically means beat them so thoroughly that it's not even close. You with me? Because how can you kill every single one and then not intermingle and marry with them? Are we there? Okay. Now, the other side of it is this. God's judgment, though delayed, and using the Israelites as an instrument of his judgment, is not our call to say right or wrong. We don't know how many hundreds or thousands of babies were murdered and killed on these altars for how many hundreds of years before God said, you know what, Israelites, go in and my judgment will come through you. So on one hand, we want God's mercy for these poor people that he's telling the Israelites to go and murder, but we're not understanding that God is actually bringing his judgment, and it's actually love that is going to stop the murder of innocent children. And that is one of the markers of a demonic move, is when babies are murdered. It's always a marker. Infants and children, those who are most vulnerable, are always attacked. Another one that they attack is the elderly, those who have mental disabilities, physical disabilities. They attack the vulnerable. The enemy, when a wolf surrounds a herd of elk, what is he looking for? The weakest one. The enemy is going to attack the weak immediately. I want to say this, look around at our culture, and that we, in some ways, have married and joined ourselves with. That's a whole nother rabbit trail. Guys, let's be like Phineas. I pray the spirit of Phineas rise up personally in your life for the sin and compromise that we each one carry. There's stuff that you need to deal with. You need to do business with God. You need to grab a spear, that the spirit of Phineas would rise up in you and you would thrust it through the productiveness of the work of the enemy in your life. And then we need Phineases in our world to rise up and say, no, it's too many babies. Too many people. The euthanasia movement that has even recently in the last, year and a half, has accelerated in Canada. There are people in Athabasca who the government is helping kill themselves. It's happening in our hometown. This is not okay. Man, the spirit of Phineas needs to rise up in this church, in this land, in this country, and say, no, enough's enough. Enough. No more. No more. John 14:15. Actually, that was the first scripture I had. Sorry, Heather. It's a simple one. What's that? I know, because I didn't want to forget. If you love me, do what? Jesus. Who loves Jesus? Are you keeping his... Let's do that again. Who loves Jesus? Some of you didn't put up your hand yet. I'm not going to look at any of those. Who is keeping his commands? Who has the spirit of Phineas in them that is saying, no, enough? Enough. This is a priest. This is not a soldier. This is not someone who is used to war. Something rises up in him and he goes, no, I need to get myself a spear and we're going to finish this thing right now. This will not end. On my watch, this will not pass. I'm not sure where you have scriptures now, Heather. So now this is really going to be, doesn't matter. I can just go with it. Sweet. Like a brand new scripture? No, I'm just kidding. She's like, whatever, I got this. Yeah, let's go to Judges 20, 18 to 28. So there's compromise in Israel's camp again. There's a backstory here. The tribe of Benjamin, as must have been as more of a collective group, has gotten off into error and into sin. So verse 18, the Israelites went up to Bethel, which is the house of God, and inquire of God. They said, who of us is to go up first against the Benjamites? So God has told them, listen, you need to weed out this trouble in the tribe of Benjamin. You need to go against them because they've allowed sin and compromise to come into their lives. I want to encourage you, Judges 20, the first part of it, go ahead and go home and read it. And the Lord replied to them, Judah, go first. Judah is the praise tribe, the worshipers. Guys, worship is not... We underestimate the power of worship, and you you underestimate the influence of music in your culture on your own heart and on your own life. You underestimate the power of worship, and you also underestimate the power of the enemy's music, the music culture. I want to say this, and this is a generalization for sure. There is a strong and a large presence of demonic worship in the music industry. I know someone who went to popular artists, and I've never really listened to her. Or know, I might recognize a song if you played it. I couldn't name one, but the artist was Katy Perry. Very popular in our culture, they tell me. I don't know. I'm kind of old. Anyways. This person described, they walked out of the concert. They're a believer. They walked out of the concert because there was a pentagram and a goat embossed in the background across the whole stage. That's a clear, obvious, satanic symbol. In plain sight. Anyways, I'm just going to leave that one there. But I want to caution you, if you're listening to secular music, there's only two things that are feeding you. God or the devil.
Your boat's going to be really rough.
Is the music from God feeding your spirit? Or is the music from the devil feeding your spirit? I want us to caution yourselves, just because a song has charismatic, rhythmic attractiveness, and it tugs on your heart. You've all heard those songs where it's like, oh man, that's a good song. Right? You've all heard this song, and it's like, well, some of them are, I don't even know, whatever I would mention today would be, let's not go there. But there's songs that are catchy. They catch your ear. They got a good tune. It's like, man, yeah, that's good. Or maybe it even has a good message. Just because it's a good message does not mean that it's feeding your spirit from God. Sorry? Don't be deceived. Don't fool yourself. What if it's just the music? I'm not going to weed into that. That's a big subject. I just opened a big box there. Right? But I want to challenge you with this. This is how I process. Lord, is this feeding me from you? Some should be very obvious. You want to do some research. Right? There are Christians who won't listen to other Christian artists because they don't believe their theology is correct. I'm not going there. Maybe there's worship songs that are wrong. We sang Blessed Be Your Name this morning. There's lots of Christians who have a big problem with that song. They think theologically it's an error. Woo. And I'm not going to tell you why. I'm just going to leave it there. Everyone's like, no. I did, didn't I? No, I'm going to leave it. I want you to go and figure it out for yourself. I love that song, by the way. Hang on. Let's not go into it. My point is not to go into it. My point is this. What sin and compromise are you tying yourself with that's impacting you? I'm not saying that song is impacting you. We sang it. We worshiped this morning. Right? But I want to declare to you, if you're listening to a ton of secular music, some of those worship artists are worshiping Satan. No, let me be a little stronger than that. You are worshiping when you're singing. You are worshiping. You are worshiping. Grab a spear. Ask God where to thrust it. The spirit of Phineas rise up. Trevor. It's not hard. You can go and search. Yeah, you can go search it. It's pretty obvious.
I was at a concert with my husband. Shout at the devil. And I was there. Shout at Yeshua.
Yeah. I don't want you to build a theology that says you can't listen to certain music or not. That's not my point. I'm not telling you what to listen to. It's not what I'm saying. If you listen to secular music, it's not like you've got to change the station as soon as Pastor Dave comes around. It's not what I'm saying. That would be probably the wrong music. If you movies, music. Now this might not work for some people. The way I did it is I always think if my mom was sitting here on the couch next to me and I'm watching this movie, would I be ashamed of it? Or pastor, whoever, fill in and sometimes that doesn't work either because we got some pastors that are way over on the kooky land. And they might be introducing you to some crazy stuff. But you understand my point. But the point of this is to go before the Lord. What did they do? They went before the Lord, they inquired. Right? They asked God. And he said, he responded to them. So where where did we go in Joshua here, or Judges? Yeah, we're right at the beginning. Okay, verse 19. I'm like, I've read this over so many times, I'm like, I don't even know where I was this morning reading it. Okay, the Lord replied, Judah shall go first. Use your worship. Use your worship. Sit before the Lord. Allow that to be the tip of the spear. Allow that to pierce your own heart. I want to tell you, the reason why we worship and sing in church is it tenderizes your heart. It pierces into places. You can sing words that you would never say. You can sing words you would never say out loud. And sometimes some stuff happens in your life and you need to ask God, okay, why is this happening? And you need to be sensitive and hear him say back to you, you worship this over your own life. You wanted this. You sang it. Worship. Go first. The next morning, the Israelites got up and pitched camp near Gibeah. The Israelites went in to fight the Benjamites and took up battle positions against them in Gibeah. The Benjamites came out of Gibeah and cut down 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. But the Israelites encountered one other and again took up their positions there where they had stationed themselves the first day. Verse 23, the Israelites went up and went before the Lord until evening, and they inquired of the Lord, and they said, shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites? And the Lord answered, go up against them. Then the Israelites drew near to Benjamin on the second day. This time, when the Benjamites came out from Gibeah to oppose them, they cut down another 18,000 Israelites, all of them armed with swords. So you're doing some math here quickly. We're at almost, 40,000 people? Just over 40,000 people. When the Israelites, then all the Israelites, the whole army went up to Bethel, and they sat weeping before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings to the Lord. And the Israelites inquired of the Lord. In those days the ark of the covenant of God was there with Phinehas, right? He's our man, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, meeting before it. And they asked, shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites, or not? You understand the tension of what's going on. They just went into battle and got slaughtered twice in a row. You got to think 40,000+ soldiers dying in 2 days is a bad day. Bad 2 days. This is not good. And what does God say? The Lord responded, go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands. Battling the enemy, battling sin in your life is not easy. There are casualties. This is not a road for the weak, for the faint of heart. But you understand this history that Phinehas has before the Lord. And he's one of the priesthood that's inquiring of the Lord. He's listening and saying, God, what do we do? But Phinehas' obedience before the Lord is more important than the horizontal view that everything is going wrong. This is not going well. God, you told us to weed these guys out. You told us to go and take arms against our brothers and sisters. These are our Israelite brothers and sisters. These are our heritage. They're in sin, and you're asking us to go in and correct them, and we're getting smacked down hard. Day 1, they go back. Lord, what do we do? And he's like, go out against them. Day 2, they go out against them, get slaughtered again. Day 3, now they're in weeping, they're mourning, they're fasting. They're like, Lord, what do we do? You hear the language change, or not. Like maybe that's, Lord, is not. Maybe not is what we should do. We should not do this. And God says, no, go out against them because I've given them into your hands. John 14:15, if you love me, keep my commands. So they go out against them and they have victory. The promises of God are invitations to partner with God. They do not give us the right to become like a boss or order God around. When God asks you to go in, it does not mean that everything's going to be hunky-dory and A-okay. You got to understand you need a spirit of Phineas that perseveres and drives through this and goes, sin, your hatred for sin must equal God's hatred for sin. Your passion for justice, your zealous nature needs to rise up. This Phineas spirit needs to rise up in us, that we don't care what the cost is. I don't care what it's going to cost me. At the end of this, I'm going to be weeping before the Lord, going, God, this is too much. And you know what he's going to say? Rise up again and go and fight. Rise up again and go and fight. Do not give up. If you love me, he's saying, the Spirit of God is saying to us this morning, if you love me, do what I've asked. Do what I've asked you to do. Obedience must not be connected to our intended outcomes. Obedience must not be connected to our intended outcomes. I don't know how many times I've been like, God, I'm doing what you're asking me to do. Why is nothing working? Everything is falling apart. Everyone is resisting. Everyone is opposing me. People hate me and say all kinds of... Did you hear the psalmist in there? He's like, Lord, the wicked prosper. You aren't who you say you are, God. Because the wicked are the ones prospering. The wicked are the ones coming against your name and your servant. Obedience must become first. Obedience must become the first manifestation of God's work in your situation. Obedience is the first manifestation. You release God's work over your life first by saying yes to Him and then doing it. You want victory in your life? Grab a spear, begin to worship, and get busy fighting. You want sin to be eradicated from your life? Grab a spear, get ready to fight, and worship. Judah went first. Obedience is in response to who He is, not what He can do for me. Our culture says, as long as I get what I need from you, then we can be in relationship. Right? This whole posture of like me first. I need some me time. No, you've got too much me time. There's too much of you in your life. You're too you focused. You're not Him focused first and then others focused. We have this intended outcome kind of caveat on everything we have in our relationships and our relationship with God. God, if it looks right, if you do the certain things, then I'll obey you. That's not the way it works. We've got to worship Him. We've got to follow Him. We've got to love Him. We've got to obey Him for one thing and one thing only, because of who He is. That's it. If that's not enough, then this is the wrong journey for you. There's lots of other things in this lifetime that can fulfill you and give you all those things. God will not be that. He doesn't owe you nothing. I want to encourage you. Sinners in the hands of an angry God. Who wrote that message? No. Oh, I had his name. Anyways. It'll come to me later.
John G. Lake.
Was it John G. Lake? Jonathan Edwards. That's who it was. Yeah, Edwards. The premise of that message, and I'm not going to give it its due. I encourage you to go home and read it. But essentially is this, is God's hand is holding you back from what you deserve. You're a sinner. And you're in the hands of a God who hates sin. You are a sinner, and you're in the hands of a God who hates sin. And all He's doing, He's actually holding you back from what you deserve. So many people are like, well, why would a good God allow X, Y, and Z? Why would a good God send people to hell? He's not sending you anywhere. You are choosing it. You are choosing it. And the favor that you have on your life is God's mercy that hopefully you will turn on some level. Turn to Him and from your sin. Turn in obedience. If you love me, you'll keep my commands. John 14:15. How many times have I said that? We're going to say it a ton more times. Genesis. Oh man. Genesis 20, verses 17 and 18. Abraham. The story of Abraham and his promised son Isaac. Abraham and Sarah are barren. They can't have children. God says, you're going to have a child. Your offspring will be so numerous. They'll be greater than the sand of the sea or the stars in the sky. God gives Abraham and Sarah this promise. Sarah laughs. There's this whole saga of it's not fulfilled. Sarah gives her maidservant to Abraham to try and fulfill God's promise. There's a great story in there about trying to fulfill the stuff God has said and promised in your own way, and it ends up coming back to bite you. Don't try and do it. Allow God to do it. But God has given them their promised son. He gives him his son, and then God asks Abraham to sacrifice his son. He says, take what I've given you, the promised son that I've given you, and go and sacrifice him to me. Give him to me. Abraham goes up with his son. Powerful story. Read through it. I mean, the greatest part is when Abraham says to his servant on the way up, the servant goes, wait a second, guys, you don't have a sacrifice. Abraham says to the servant these words. He says, God will provide, and my son and I will be back in a little while. That's a man who knows his God. That's a man who knows his God. So he's obedient. God says this, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies. And through your offspring, all nations on the earth will be blessed. Why? Because you have what? Obeyed me. Was Abraham perfect? Oh boy, no. Did he have issues? Read about him and Sarah and how he tells the king they go in and he tells the king that Sarah is his sister because he's afraid. And this guy, the Lord, tells the king, that's his wife. Don't touch her. Abraham, what are you doing? But God says this, because you have obeyed me, I'm going to do what? I'm going to bless your offspring. Guys, you want to see something ripple in your family? You want to see something ripple in your heritage? Take a spear with the spirit of Phineas and destroy sin in your life. You want to see loved ones for generations? You are sitting here today as a result of Abraham's obedience. Because he did that, because he obeyed, we're sitting here today. Wow. So what is the obedience God's asking you? What is the compromise that's in your life from the world that God's saying, grab a spear in the spirit of Phineas and destroy it? Destroy it. 1 Samuel 15:22-23. Man, I'm going through lots of stories this morning, but it's so good. I could have had tons more. I got like 2.5 pages of scriptures, mostly scriptures and a few notes and stuff. Guys, there's so many stories. This is the story of Samuel. He's confronting Saul. David quotes this in Psalm 51. It's one of my favorite passages where David repents before the Lord. Samuel replied to Saul, this is a whole situation where Saul was supposed to go in. They were supposed to destroy the city. They were supposed to do certain things with the animals and the people, and they didn't. Saul comes before Samuel and says, oh man, he's like, no, we did this as an offering for the Lord. The reason I didn't obey God is because I wanted to give him a sacrifice and an offering. Oh, it's so bad. It's like Saul's heart was so twisted. He was so far removed from the impact of his heavenly Father. At one point, Saul had prophesied with the prophets. When God anointed him king, he went around prophesying with the prophets. Wow. And now he's come so far, and this is what Samuel says to him in confronting him with his sin. Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. Verse 23, this is the two bookends of Saul's situation, where Samuel's saying, listen, for rebellion is like the sin of divination or witchcraft, and arrogance is like the devil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you. Guys, if we are not willing to have the spirit of Phinehas and rise up, where are the areas of compromise in your life? Where are the areas? Like the Israelites, we need to fast and pray and seek the Lord in weeping and gnashing of teeth and come before him with humility and say, God, tell me what to do. What are you asking of me? You rise up and you battle it. Who's been there? Who's battled their stuff and gotten completely smacked down? Everybody should have their hands up.
No comment.
No comment, yeah. I'll plead the fifth on that one, thank you. And the next day you rise up and get smacked down again. Grab your spear this morning. We're going out again. We're going after it again. Why? Because if you love me, you'll keep my commands. Who here loves Jesus? Grab a spear. Grab a spear. God's blessing is on the other side of obedience. God's favor is on the other side of obedience. If you've had trouble connecting with your Heavenly Father, if there's areas of your life that are obvious, there's other areas that are not so obvious, where you haven't had that intimate time with Him, whether reading the Word or in worship, in prayer and devotional time. Let's go before Him this morning and say, God, what do we need to do? What are you asking me to do that I have not done? Let's not be like Saul in trying to manipulate and pacify the image. I'm doing everything right. This is for the Lord. How magnanimous, you lying, deceiving spirit. We see you, and you can break off in Jesus' name. Imagine how much sin compromises in our own lives, and we justify it and pacify it, saying it's okay. God, it's okay with God. He's okay with it. This morning we're grabbing spears. Let's stand. Right now, Lord, we come before you. And we ask two things. First of all, Lord, we ask for the spirit of Phinehas to come over us. This spirit that will not compromise. This tenacious, zealous, ferocious spirit that says, I will not compromise. Lord, right now, give us the boldness to call sin what it is. God, give us the boldness to not sugarcoat it, to not try and pacify it as something other than what it is. Lord, it's sin. Anything but complete and 100% obedience to you, Lord, is sin. Father, let that spirit would permeate this place. Go deep into each one of our hearts. Right now, God, we see our sin and our compromise before you. I want us to do this exercise. Just pretend as your eyes are closed. Just pretend that you're holding out your hands. You can even hold out your hands right now. Just pretend your compromise and your sin is there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many things there are. Maybe you need both hands. Lord, it's right there. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to acknowledge, Lord, that we need to grab a spear and we need to begin to war. Father, right now, what should we do? What is the strategy? Lord, give us the strategy. God, what do we do about this? Lord, help us. Father, we need you. We're here calling sin what it is. We're here not trying to hide it. It's plain. We're laid bare before you, Lord. God, we're tired of this compromise and sin coming into the place, compromising the place where we should be meeting with you, that we should be having relationship and intimacy with you. Father, what are we supposed to do? Give us strategies. How do we partner with you? Let's do a simple act. If you want the spirit of Phineas on your life, I want you to put your hand on your chest. I want you to pray after me. Lord, give me the spirit of Phineas right now in Jesus' name. In Jesus' name, Father, the spirit of Phineas, the spirit of zealous, tenacious passion for you, Jesus. We need you, Father. If you love me, keep my commands. Amen. Amen.